he stole it. He'd stolen it, And I did the whole number, go back and apologize and return it. I'll never steal again, that.
By the middle of the 1970s, the Partridge Family had become one of America's most popular television shows. Every week, millions of families gathered around their TV sets to watch the musical adventures of the Partridge clan. The show seemed perfect from the outside, with its catchy songs, bright colors, and heartwarming family moments. But behind the scenes, things were very different from what viewers saw at home. Shirley Jones, who played the mother Shirley Partridge, was quietly dealing with problems that fans never knew about. The show had started as a team effort where every cast member got their chance to shine. But as time went on, the scripts began focusing almost entirely on David Cassidy's character, Keith. This left Shirley and the other actors with much smaller parts than they had before. The atmosphere on the set was changing, and not in a good way. For many years, Shirley kept quiet about what really happened behind the cameras. She let people believe that she simply moved on to other opportunities when the show ended. But now, at 91 years old, she has decided to tell the truth about why she walked away from one of television's most beloved shows. Her reasons might surprise you. When The Partridge Family first aired in September 1970, nobody expected it to become such a huge hit. The show told the story of a single mother raising 5 children while they all performed together as a traveling band. The stories were uplifting, the music was catchy, and the whole show had a bright, cheerful look that made families want to watch together every week. Shirley Jones was perfect for the role of the mother. She had been acting and singing for years, and had even won an Academy Award for her work in movies. She brought warmth and believability to the character of Shirley Partridge. The early days of filming were wonderful. All the actors got along well, from the loungest cast members like Susan Dey and Danny Bonaduce to the breakout star David Cassidy. They didn't just act like a family on screen. They really felt like one when the cameras stopped rolling. Between scenes, the soundstage was filled with laughter. Even the long hours spent rehearsing the musical numbers felt rewarding because everyone was having fun. The show's creators seemed committed to making something that was both wholesome and entertaining. Shirley felt like she had found the perfect role that matched both her personal values and her professional skills. The music from the show became incredibly popular. Songs like "I Think I Love You" reached the top of the charts around the world. The cast found themselves not just acting, but becoming real pop stars. They went on concert tours, received thousands of fan letters, and appeared on television shows and in magazines constantly. The Partridge Family was more than just a TV show. It was a cultural phenomenon that swept everyone involved along with it. Shirley took pride in how the show portrayed a single mother leading her children with love and strength. This was unusual for television at the time, and she was happy to be part of something positive. Those early years felt like the perfect balance between art and entertainment. The work was hard, but it was worth it when they saw how much fans loved the show. Shirley enjoyed watching the younger actors grow both in their roles and in real life, and she loved the energy they brought to every scene. The creative team seemed open to ideas from the actors, and the scripts gave every character their own moments to shine. But success has a way of changing things behind the scenes. As the ratings got higher and certain cast members became more famous, subtle changes began to happen. Shirley noticed small differences in the scripts, the focus of the storylines, and even how the cast got along when they weren't filming. At first, these changes seemed like the natural evolution of a successful series, but they were actually warning signs of much bigger problems to come. By the second season, the tone on the set had started to change in ways that were hard to ignore. What had once been an equal celebration of every character was beginning to focus more and more on David Cassidy's character, Keith Partridge. From the network's point of view, this made perfect business sense. David had become a teen idol almost overnight. His face was on magazine covers everywhere, he was selling out concert venues, and he was bringing in TV ratings that matched the biggest shows on television. But for Shirley Jones, this shift felt like the beginning of an imbalance that was eating away at what made the show special. It wasn't that she was jealous. Shirley adored David and was very proud of his success. In fact, she often defended him against the pressures that came with sudden fame, knowing from her own experience how brutal the entertainment industry could be. But she couldn't ignore that the family dynamic, which was the heart of the series, was slowly being replaced by a spotlight on just one person. Scenes that once explored the mother's perspective or showed the younger kids' stories were being shortened or cut completely. The storylines became predictable, always revolving around Keith's romantic problems or his rise as a pop star. The deeper, more meaningful family themes were starting to disappear. This was exactly the opposite of what had made the show special in the first place. Behind the scenes, the production schedule became more demanding. Between filming the TV series, recording albums, and fitting in David's concert tours, the pace was relentless. Shirley could see the toll it was taking on everyone, especially David, who was trying to balance being both a fictional character and a real-life teen idol. While the producers pushed harder to make money from his popularity, Shirley worried about everyone getting burned out and about what was happening to the quality of the series itself. The mood on set reflected these changes. The once lighthearted atmosphere was now filled with tension. Some of the younger cast members felt overshadowed and weren't sure where they fit in the evolving storylines. Crew members quietly noticed the changes in tone, and Shirley began hearing whispered complaints. She tried to keep the peace, staying the steady, motherly figure she had been from the start, but deep down she could feel that the family they had built, both on screen and off, was slowly breaking apart. Shirley still hoped that with the right conversations, things could be balanced again. She believed in the show's original vision and wanted to fight for it. But the network had discovered how much money David Cassidy's fame could bring in. And once television executives smell profit, it's very rare for them to change course. What Shirley didn't realize at the time was that the imbalance she was seeing was only the beginning. The changes were about to speed up in ways that would push her patience and her loyalty to the limit. By the time the show reached its fourth season in 1974, Shirley Jones could no longer ignore the growing problems. The scripts, which had once been rich with heart and humor, were becoming predictable and formulaic. Episodes that had once balanced the voices of the entire Partridge family were now almost entirely centered around Keith's charm, Keith's troubles, or Keith's latest girlfriend. Shirley's role had been reduced to delivering brief lines of motherly advice before stepping aside to make room for yet another storyline designed around David Cassidy's appeal. For an actress of her experience and talent, these creative limitations were both frustrating and heartbreaking. She had decades of experience in the industry and knew she was capable of so much more than what she was being asked to do. The lighthearted family atmosphere behind the scenes had almost completely disappeared. The pressure to maintain ratings and keep feeding the David Cassidy phenomenon had turned the set into a place where tension simmered just below the surface. The younger cast members, particularly Susan Day and Danny Bonaduce, were beginning to feel invisible. Scripts that could have developed their characters were either watered down or thrown out completely. Conversations that once focused on creative ideas now centered on merchandising opportunities and fan demographics. The show had become more about business than about telling good stories. Shirley also began to see how much the situation was affecting David himself. His grueling schedule left him physically and emotionally exhausted. Between filming the show, recording albums, and performing live concerts, he was running on empty. Shirley, who was fiercely protective of David in real life, worried about what the industry was doing to him. Yet any attempt to slow down the pace was met with resistance from producers and network executives who were unwilling to let their money-making star rest. Privately, Shirley began to question what she was really staying for. The work no longer felt fulfilling, and the creative spark that had drawn her to the series had been replaced by a rigid formula. Even the music, which had once been fresh and exciting, was starting to feel repetitive. She would come home from long filming days feeling a heaviness she had never experienced before in her career. A sense that the joy had been drained from something she once loved deeply. The breaking point came during a script meeting late in the season. Shirley brought up her concerns about the direction of the show and suggested ways to bring back the ensemble feel and give other characters more meaningful storylines. Her suggestions were politely dismissed, with the implication that the current formula was working and didn't need to be fixed. It was in that moment that Shirley realized the heart of the Partridge family. The thing that made it special, was no longer the priority. The network had made its choice, and now she would have to make hers. Leaving wouldn't be easy. It meant stepping away from a steady paycheck, millions of adoring fans, and a show that had become part of television history. But Shirley knew that staying would mean sacrificing her own creative integrity, and that was a price she was no longer willing to pay. What she didn't anticipate was how her departure would connect with David Cassidy's own growing unhappiness, setting the stage for the end of an era. While Shirley Jones was dealing with her own frustrations, David Cassidy's personal battles were becoming harder to hide. To millions of fans, he was the ultimate teen idol, selling out stadiums, topping the charts, and appearing on magazine covers around the world. But behind the glittering image, David was trapped in a grinding cycle that left no room for rest, privacy, or a normal life. His days were spent filming The Partridge Family. His nights and weekends were taken up by concert tours, and whatever time remained was filled with photo shoots, press interviews, and endless fan commitments. Shirley, having experienced the highs and lows of Hollywood herself, could read the signs of burnout. There were days when David arrived on set visibly exhausted, running on little more than coffee and determination, yet still expected to bring the same charm and energy that made him famous. When the cameras stopped rolling, the demands continued. There was no downtime, no chance to catch his breath. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. David felt trapped in Keith Partridge's shadow, with his real self hidden behind a carefully crafted image. Fans adored the wholesome, easygoing character they saw on television. But David longed for more challenging, mature roles. The problem was that the same industry that had built his fame was determined to keep him in the role that guaranteed ratings and record sales. Shirley watched with growing concern. She admired his ability to keep showing up despite the pressure, but she also knew he was being pushed beyond his limits. Her efforts to protect him from the more exploitative aspects of the business were no match for the machine driving his career. The strain began to affect the atmosphere on set. The once light-hearted environment grew heavier as David's fatigue, occasional irritability, and resentment toward the show's creative constraints became more visible. For Shirley, it was clear they were both fighting similar battles. She for creative fulfillment, he for personal freedom. This unspoken understanding deepened her resolve. She couldn't watch someone she cared about being worn down without questioning her own place in the show. What neither of them knew was that their shared discontent was setting the stage for major change. By the middle of the 4th season, Shirley Jones knew she had reached her limit. The show she had once been proud to call home had shifted from a warm ensemble story to a vehicle almost entirely centered on David Cassidy's popularity. While she respected his talent and understood the business logic, she couldn't ignore how much this focus had drained the heart from the series and pushed her character into the background. Episodes went by where she had little more than a few brief lines. For an actress who had built her career on layered, meaningful performances, it was both frustrating and disheartening. Her choice to leave wasn't solely about her own role. Shirley could see the exhaustion weighing on David, who was quietly expressing his own desire to step away from the pressures of being a teen idol. In their private conversations, there was a shared understanding. Both were ready for something different. With her contract ending, Shirley made the deliberate decision not to renew. It wasn't a dramatic walkout, but a quiet stand for her self-respect and creative integrity. The network tried to tempt her with promises of more balanced scripts and bigger moments, but she had been in the industry long enough to recognize empty reassurances. The show's formula was locked in, and she had no interest in watching the same cycle repeat. When her decision became known, reactions on set were mixed. Some people were disappointed, while others understood completely. For Shirley, it was bittersweet. She cared deeply for her castmates, especially the younger actors she had watched grow up. But she also knew that staying too long risked not only losing her passion for acting, but also losing respect for herself as an artist. What she couldn't have predicted was that her exit would also influence David's decision. Soon after, he too would decide it was time to move on, and together their departures would mark the beginning of the end for the Partridge family. When Shirley Jones's decision to leave became official, it was as if the air shifted on set. For 4 seasons, she had been the glue holding the Partridge family together, both on and off screen. Her departure wasn't the kind of drama that made tabloid headlines, but those who worked closely with her knew what it meant. The soul of the show was leaving. Not long after, David Cassidy made it clear that he too was ready to move on. The combination of losing its maternal anchor and its breakout star was a blow the series couldn't recover from. The announcement was handled quietly, but the ripple effect was immediate. Fans had grown deeply attached to Shirley's warm, grounding presence and David's youthful energy. Without them, the Partridge family would have lost its identity. Executives considered the idea of continuing with replacement actors or changing the format, but even they understood that the magic of the show was tied directly to the chemistry of its original cast. By the end of the 4th season, the decision was made. There would be no 5th season. In the years that followed, Shirley looked back on her time with the show with mixed emotions. She remained proud of what they had created in those early seasons, the joy, the music, and the sense of family that connected with millions of viewers. She also valued the relationships she had built, many of which lasted long after the cameras stopped rolling. But she never regretted walking away. The choice had preserved her love for performing and allowed her to move on to roles that challenged her in new ways. David's own departure reflected her reasoning in many ways. He had grown tired of being locked into the image of Keith Partridge and wanted to explore new creative directions. Like Shirley, he carried fond memories of the show but also a clear understanding of why it couldn't last. Fame had been both a gift and a cage, and leaving the Partridge family was his way of reclaiming his freedom. Even decades later, fans still approach Shirley with heartfelt gratitude for the role she played in their lives. She understands the nostalgia because she feels it too. But she also knows that the magic they remember was tied to a very specific moment in time. Trying to force it to last longer would have only weakened it. By leaving when she did, she ensured that the Partridge family would be remembered at its brightest, rather than in a slow, drawn-out decline. Now at 91, Shirley speaks about her decision with calm certainty. Time has only reinforced what she felt then, that knowing when to walk away is just as important as knowing when to say yes. For her, the end of the Partridge family woe sent a loss but a turning point that marked the close of one chapter and the start of another, leaving behind a legacy that half a century later still makes people smile.